Hey guys, thanks for watching, first of all. Second of all, much appreciated. Just wanted to remind everybody to subscribe. Not only would I appreciate it, but also I'm in the midst of my MERN Stack Masterclass. The first video is out currently. The setup where we sort of set up everything and then we dive in the next video we're going to dive directly into coding the back end and then of course the front end after that. So subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you can get notified when those videos are out. um, but I wanted to do something in the meantime just to sort of supplement because it is a master class for the MERN stack, so it does take a little bit longer to get everything together. So in between, I just wanted to do this tutorial on how to work with React hooks. And if you're not familiar with what React hooks are, basically um, it uses functional components as opposed to class-based components in React. Class-based components are a lot bigger and they use state. Both functional and class components use state, but um, in class components, the code is there's a more code, and with functional components using hooks, there's a lot less, as you'll see, and I'll give you a couple examples here in the video. Um, so the reason for this is that you can sort of, as opposed to class-based components where you have to pass um, props down to child components, meaning there's one main component where you draw in the state from wherever you're getting it, an API or your node server or whatever, and then you can only pass it down to uh, child components through props. Otherwise, you'd have to do an entirely different API call, which can sometimes slow down your app. So React hooks, they hook into the main state, which is basically the reason for them. And they're cool. I wouldn't say, and what I'm going to show you, this is not the full extent of it, but it is the main purpose of them. So I just wanted to go over sort of how it goes. And also, I wanted to show you how we can use React hooks to hit an API, whether it be, like I said, your node server route, or just a standard API that already exists, like the one we're going to use today, the trusty old JSON placeholder, which is basically just some dummy info composed in um, JSON format. We're going to use the to-dos. I know to-dos are overused and whatever, but for this application, it'll work just fine. So, this is our code. I'm sorry, this is our JSON. This is our API endpoint that we're going to hit in our uh, in our example. However, we're not going to do this first. What I'm going to do first is just show you, and I have VS Code open. So what I'm going to show you first is just the basic idea and how we can create state and then edit it uh, in the return, so it renders on the web page on the front end. Um, let's see. So okay, so what I did here was I used create React app and to create a just a blank boilerplate. I already went through and deleted all the files that we're not going to need, deleted the boilerplate React logos and information and stuff, deleted a couple files. If you want to know how to do that, I have a video on that, and I will link it above and also in the description so that you can get caught up on that. So I would suggest go watching that first and then coming back to this. You don't have to, but it's definitely a help, and it helps sort of um, uh, catch you up to speed so you're not lost on anything. Anyway, so I have just a basic boilerplate. I just brought in this logo just to make it a little nice. I also added in my index HTML. It's not ideal, but I just did it real quick for this tutorial so things look a little more organized. I just brought in Bootstrap 4 just to so that everything's sort of in the center here so that we could see. Otherwise, it would be over towards the edge here. All right, so look, let me close this. So let's dive into it. So React hooks. Normally, if you have a class component in React, you know, you would it would say, class, and then you'd have extends and all that other stuff. But for now, we just have function, okay? And then, for your class component, you'd have your state here, and then whatever, you know, to dos, and then you'd set it to an empty string, and then you'd have your loading for your loading icon or whatever, set to, actually that would be false. Oops, false. But for this, you don't have to do that. You don't have to make a constructor or anything like that because that's basic JavaScript uh, class components, where you have a constructor and you bring in props, but that's another tutorial. Anyway, so first, really the only thing you need to do, and as you can see up here, we imported React, which you do for all React applications regardless. Then I have these other two in here inside of these brackets, which is how you bring in additional um, functions individually without bringing in the entire class and or function. The first one is useState, which is the sort of quote unquote international React hook function. So that allows us to use the React hooks to use state. Now this use effect, ignore that for just right now. We're going to come back to that in our second example. But for right now, we're just going to focus on this use state, okay? And we import it from React. I also pre-installed Axios, which I also go over in the other video that I linked to. So I installed Axios and then I just brought it in. And then this is just the logo thing that's here, this little logo thing here. So no big deal. All right, now, so we have our use state function here that we brought in. And this is it to bring in our state. Const, we're going to create a const, we're going to use square brackets, and then we're going to give our state a name, whatever we're going to use, like a variable. Almost kind of similar to destructuring, if you're familiar with destructuring. So we're going to give it a name of count for this, if I can spell, count for this first example. So count, and then we're going to set up a way to manipulate our state, sort of like a function, but it's not exactly a function. And then so those are inside the brackets, and then we're going to do equals use state, which is our function we brought in up here, and then parentheses. Okay, now for this example, we're just going to set our initial state to 0. This is where you set your initial state. So if you were bringing in an API based on your component did mount, you would put that in here, which I'll show you in the next example. But for right now, we're just going to set it to 0. Okay, and that's it. We'll throw a semicolon on there in case anybody gets upset with us. So that's it. That's our state. So this is the name of our state here. This is our variable to manipulate our state, which you'll see in just a little bit. All right, so I'm going to come in here and just delete this. No, I'm sorry. I'll keep that, whatever. I guess you know what? Forget it. I'll just delete it just so there's no confusion. All right, so we have our empty div, okay? And we're going to create a p tag real quick. And here we're going to put our curly brackets, just like you would this dot state dot whatever. And we're going to put count. No need to put this dot state or anything like that. And then just for fun, we're going to put a button, okay? And we're going to say, click me, okay? I don't think I have, for some reason, prettier is not working for me, so it's not going to save it real pretty. So I'll try to buzz by it real quick. So for our button, we're going to do an on-click event equals curly braces for our function that's inside of the onClick. We're going to tell the application what to do when somebody clicks on the button, and then we're going to have a arrow function, or we're going to open an arrow function, and here's where we use our set count. Here's where we use our set count function that we put up here. So whatever you put in here is what you're putting in here. And then we're just going to take our count and we're going to add 1 to it. Okay. And that is it. Okay. So let me save that. So let me just recap. So this is our state. This is the name of our state and how we're going to reference it elsewhere. This is our state manipulator. And then this is our use state function. And then we just set the initial state. And then down here is where we're going to manipulate it. Or rather the user is going to manipulate it. Oh, I have to do one thing. Is it still running? I guess it is. Yeah, it is. Okay, I forgot if it was running or not. Is it? I might have to restart it. So I'm going to open a terminal. I forgot I was setting this up earlier. So npm start to start our application. Okay. Oh. Yeah, sure, whatever. I forget. I think I didn't stop it before or something like that. So it's just starting it on 3001. It's just, the way it works. So, okay, so here's our button. Obviously no styling. You know what? Let me, just because I can't resist, I'm going to do class name equals btn dash large. I think this is how you do it. I forget. All right, never mind. Forget it. I forget what it is off the top of my head. It's not important. All right. So anyway, so save all. All right, now so here's our count currently set to 0, just like here. It's set to 0. If we put that to 5, okay, this would then change to 5. That's just our initial state. And then our button adds 1, right? So clear it. You can come back here and, whatever. It's pretty standard JavaScript. You can take whatever your count is, whatever your initial state is, we'll make it 10. And then and then it will see it starts at 10 and then so that's our state. Okay, so that's really all we need to do to define state, as opposed to creating a constructor, creating a this dot state and having to worry about coming down here, or even in here you would do this dot state dot count, but in this case that's not necessary. All right, now let's move on to the sort of nitty gritty of it. So I'm going to delete this here. And if you guys want me to deploy this, or not deploy this, excuse me, put this on my GitHub account so you can have the code and play around with it, I'd be more than happy to. Just leave a comment and I'd be glad to upload it. And I'll also include a link to my GitHub link in the description. Okay, so let's move on to our sort of nitty gritty. All right, so here's where our use effect. Oh, sorry. Here's where our use effect function is going to come into play, because we're actually going to load. We're going to use Axios to access an endpoint, aka our API, our JSON placeholder thingy. Okay, so again, we're going to do const. Oops, yeah, const. And then we're going to do our square brackets, and we'll call it data, just for right now, just to be really generic. And then get data is our state manipulator function technically. And then we're going to say equals use state again, because we're doing just what we did with the counter. We're manipulating our state. Now, because we are hitting an endpoint that is going to have information in it, aka an array of objects, which is JSON, we're just going to set it to an empty array for now. So initially it's going to be empty. Okay, we'll throw a semicolon on there. Now, this is where our use effect comes into play. Okay, our use effect function, parentheses, and we're going to do a arrow function, open up some brackets, and then this is where we do our Axios call. Okay, Axios, if you're familiar with it, is a promise-based function, and we're going to do .get, .get, and we're going to do parentheses. I like to do it on the next line. That's fine. We're going to take our JSON placeholder URL, which is going to give us all this information here. Hopefully, if we do it right, we're going to put that in there. That's our JSON call. Okay. So we come outside of that get, and then we're going to do .then, because it's promise based in JavaScript, and we're going to call it result. We're just going to call this, we could call this anything, but we're going to call it, it's kind of like the high order array method in a way where you rename the variable. And then we're going to do an arrow function, no parentheses because it's an arrow function, but we only have one parameter. And then we're going to do, this is where we do our get data, okay? And then we're going to use that result dot data, okay? And that's really it. Oh, one more thing. What the heck is my missing an extra? I'm missing an extra parenthesis here somehow. So okay, so we have our closing parentheses. Wait a sec. Let me just fix this up real quick. I'm not going to put this on a separate line. It's kind of silly. Dot then get result here. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, because we don't have the closing parentheses. That was a problem. Now, one real quick thing that can kind of drive you nuts that you want to pay attention to. So basically, this use effect is getting the API call. So if you leave it like this, it's basically going to be an endless loop that's just going to continue to get this information over and over and over again. So what we want to do is, once the API is hit and we get all of our information that we expect, we want to return it to an empty array. So we do that by giving a comma after the parentheses, or I'm sorry, the curly brackets, and then we set it back to an empty array. So it goes from an empty array to a, I guess, full array, if you want to call it that, our information. And then once that's done, we get, we set it back to an empty array. Okay. Then down here, all we have to do is now display our information. We'll put it in an unordered list, okay? And we're going to do a high order array method, which is the dot map method, which maps through the information. And we are going to take our data, which is this. This is what it gives us, or this is what we're going to use. So I'm sorry, data dot map, okay? And then we're going to for our function or our method, I should say, we're going to give it parentheses, okay? And we're going to call these to-dos because that's what they are, or actually just to-do because they're just going to be individual. And here's our fat arrow, fat arrow or arrow function. And we're going to open parentheses, I believe. Yeah, okay. So I don't know why these freaking bubbles keep popping up. Anyway, so, let's just put it, we're going to put it in a list. Okay, so we get our list item. All right, and then we're just going to do inside each list item, we're going to do to-do dot title, which is in our API, which is this title right here. That's what we're pulling out. Completed is, other stuff that you can tap into. So this new variable that we've given the to-do information is right here. We just repeat that here, and then we get the title. we append onto that the title, which is what we want. So let's save that and see what it gives us. Okay, good. Let me just delete this because I deleted the React logo, so that's why we're getting this little warning thing. Good. And then let's look at our information. And here we go. Here's all our to-dos, right? Same as these. Right. Let's check the console. Okay, we're getting this warning, which is pretty common. Each child in a list should have a unique key prop, right? Key props for lists or whatever, any sort of information, React requires that you have an individual identifier for each list item, so that in the virtual DOM, which is the big bonus of React, it knows which one to update. So if this was changed to something else, it would specifically know that this one needs to be changed, and it wouldn't have to cycle through all these, all your information, whatever. So real simple. So we're going to go back here, and we're going to give a key equals in curly braces, and then we're just going to use to do .id, because, which is pretty standard. Each one of these has their own ID, different number, and they all have to be unique. You can't just, use a standard thing. I'll show you what I mean. You can't just use like 1, 2, 3, something like that, right? Because then it's going to give every single one the same number, and we still get a warning, right? So it's got to be unique. Okay, so that's why we use the to do .id, and then you'll see the warning goes away. Yeah, there we go. So I'll close this, and this is all our information rendering. Okay, and to be honest, that's it, guys. I wish it was, well, I don't wish it was more complicated, but that's really it. Also, if you wanted, you would take all this information, and this is where you would put your, am I spelling that right? Component, I can't spell component. Did mount, right? This is, that's where we go inside of there, okay? But for now, we don't need that. I did spell it wrong. Whatever. Anyway, so there you go. That is not all you could do with React hooks, but that is an introduction on how to use React hooks to control state, or rather to bring in state and then manipulate it onto the screen. And not only that, something that's not covered in the React documentation is exactly how to set, because sometimes it could be confusing as to what to put in here. Sometimes you'll see like to-dos, and then colon, and then an empty array. But in this regard, you don't need to do that, because we just have this particular JSON holder is just an array of objects. Sometimes there's an object of an array inside of an object of objects, if that makes sense. Anyway, so for that regards, this is how you would do it. You just set it initially to an empty array, you fill it with the information, and then you reset it back to an empty array once we get all the information, so that it's not in a continuous, endless loop. Okay, that's really it, guys. I appreciate your attention, and I hope you found this video helpful. Again, I don't proclaim to have all the answers. I just like to explain it. And there's a lot of other videos out there, but it helps to immerse yourself in this stuff and practice as much as possible. And I think that, hearing the same subject matter explained different ways by different people is really beneficial. And I know it certainly helped me in the early days when I was learning this stuff way back when. And that's just something that I wanted to give back and help other people learn that way. All right, listen, guys. Again, I appreciate your attention, and don't forget to subscribe and like this video if you found it helpful. Also, if you'd like this code, I'd be more than happy to upload it to my GitHub. So just drop a comment, and I we'll upload it, and I will leave the link in my description. All right, everybody. Thank you. Take care. Bye.